Hello class, today we are beginning our first lesson in our new unit on ecosystems. Here are our three main objectives or goals for today. First, you will learn to describe what living and non-living parts make up an ecosystem. Then, you will define what a habitat is. Last, you will explain why habitats are important. Look at the example picture on the screen. Perhaps you've seen a similar scene like this in nature. Imagine you're walking through the woods, and you look up into a tree and see a bird building its nest. You look behind the tree and see a squirrel eating an acorn. Down in the soil, you see a worm. These organisms are living together in what we call an ecosystem. An ecosystem is all the living and non-living things in an environment and how they interact. So that definition is going to be important to keep in mind throughout this unit, and you do need to write it in your notes. So let's listen one more time. An ecosystem is all the living and non-living things in an environment and how they interact. Ecosystems can be as large as a forest or as small as a drop of water. That should also go in your notes. Even a tiny backyard is an ecosystem. So today maybe when you get home, you can look in your backyard and notice what makes up that ecosystem. What living things do you see? What non-living things do you see? How are they all important, and how do they work together? So again, an ecosystem is all the living and non-living things in an environment and how they interact. Let's first look at some examples of the living parts of an ecosystem. Animals and plants are the living parts of an ecosystem. The plants and animals interact in many ways. For instance, plants and trees provide shelter for birds and squirrels. In turn, birds and squirrels help spread the seeds of plants and trees. So make sure to write in your notes, animals and plants are living parts of an ecosystem. You can also provide some examples. Now, let's think about the non-living parts of an ecosystem. Wind, rocks, soil, water, and sunlight are examples of non-living parts of an ecosystem. Wind helps spread seeds just like animals. Plants depend on soil, water, and sunlight to grow. Insects and worms tunnel through soil, which helps air and water get into the soil. Rocks provide shelter for many small animals and insects. So even the non-living parts of an environment play an important role and help the living parts. Make sure to write down in your notes some examples of the non-living parts of an ecosystem and how they help. So it's important to keep in mind when we think about ecosystems that all the parts of an ecosystem have an important role, and they all can help each other or harm each other. Did you know that you are also part of an ecosystem where you live? The air you breathe, the water you drink, and the plants and animals you eat are all parts of that ecosystem. What you do affects the plants and animals in your ecosystem. What do you think you might do to help the plants and animals where you live? Something important to think about. So far we've gotten an introduction to what an ecosystem is. We've thought about the living and non-living parts of an ecosystem. And our last thing for today is we're going to start to talk about habitat. So what is a habitat? You've probably heard this word before. Maybe you already know. A habitat is a place where an animal or plant lives. So that's the definition you need in your notes. Habitats provide food, water, and shelter that animals need for survival. So this answers the question, why are habitats important? They provide food, water, and shelter. All plants and animals live in habitats. What is the habitat for a whale? What is the habitat for a bird? What about for humans? We will continue to talk about habitats and look at some examples in some later lessons. That's all for today. Thank you for joining us.